I'm Scott Al Miller. It's the 13th of July, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua, and today I'm in Ciudad Sandino on the west side of Managua. It is a very windy day. I'm going to be talking about gated communities today because we've been looking at a lot of houses that have been in gated communities, and I think it's worth talking a little bit about what they're like and why you may be interested in one. And they're very popular here in Ciudad Sandino, so it's a great place to be talking about it. I'm going to see you right after the bump.
Freight car steaming down the line to Birmingham. My guitar is the only friend that gives a damn.
All right, it's perfect time to talk about gated communities as I have a gate right over my shoulder. Here in Nicaragua, gated communities are rather popular among the middle class and those who are a little bit more affluent, and so you see them all over. But they're a relatively new phenomenon here. They've arisen in the last 10 years or so, and now they are very prevalent. But why? What makes them so popular? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and a lot of people immediately jump to, well, it must be a security thing. And in a way, that's true, but everyone thinks of it in terms of things must be so insecure that you need to have gates and guards and all this stuff to stay safe. And that is not the case at all. Nicaragua is a very safe country. Of course, gated communities can pop up in rough areas, and that can be a way to live in an area that is otherwise rough or very urban. And this particular area of Ciudad Sandino has a reputation of being on the rougher side of the less dense populated areas of Managua. It was built very quickly after the earthquake in 1972. It has a relatively dense population, so it falls into kind of an urban zone, but also in the kind of the suburban donut range. So it's an interesting kind of area where you get a mix of very city and suburban together, more like a city in the US and less like the suburbs, but it is a primary suburb of Managua here in Nicaragua. Ciudad Sandino is not particularly dangerous. People love to say those things. Everyone here acts like they're terrified of it, but if you watch my old episodes, you see me go out and walk around some of these places, and it's really not an area of particular concern. But if you did live here, you would be aware that your everyday life would be slightly higher risk than if you lived in a Leon or a Granada, for example. So it's all about finding a balance. It is not an unsafe area by any means, but it is an area where you're a little bit more concerned. You're not going to leave your doors unlocked or whatever, but it is basically an urban area, right? There's strangers on the sidewalk all the time, so that's something you have to be concerned about. Part of normal culture almost everywhere outside the United States is a desire to be able to live outside to some degree, meaning you want to be able to sit out and barbecue. You want to be able to do outside activities. You want to be able to do some housework outside. You want your kids to go outside and play, that kind of thing. And while that does happen in the United States as well, of course, the percentage of time that people want to spend inside or outside is very different on average as you go across society. And so that fact alone changes how people view the world significantly. I'm showing some of the cool places in a small gated community here, just so you have an idea of what it looks like. And so if you have kids especially, or you have animals, and you want to be able to live in a place that's maybe not huge, right? You don't want to maintain your own grounds. You don't want to have a massive place to deal with. What do you do? How do you make it so that they can play in the streets, so that the dogs can just wander? You can have open space and have that village feeling of the 1800s where you're just part of an outdoor community. You just walk out your door and participate in the outside world while maintaining some safety. And we're not talking about violent crime. We're not talking about anything as dangerous as the United States, right? These are things you would never consider in the US. Small town US, you're still not going to just leave your doors open and let kids wander around and whatever. Like, you're just never going to get there. So no matter what I say, if your takeaway is, oh, it must be dangerous, you've completely lost the thread. It is so safe in general, so much safer than what you're used to. Wherever you're coming from, maybe not Canada, okay, small town Canada, yeah, it's safer. But in general, you're looking at a place that is much safer than what most of the people watching the show are used to. We are not talking about a safety because people are scared. We're talking about a safety of convenience, of beauty, of family values. You want your kids to be able to wander around outside. You want to be able to take a nap outside, I say, as I'm watching someone do that. You want your dogs to be able to be outside all these things, and you want them to be, hola, and you want them, oh, perfect example, as I say it, kids playing outside, the cat under the car, and you want this comfort of being able to just let your kids run outside and play and go meet the neighbors and not have to worry about locking up the house and not have to worry about where they're going and what they're doing. And even if you're not worried about the safety of something happening to them from a dangerous people standpoint, you may be just worried about traffic. Right? It's very, very rare in the United States that you have a place where you can just let kids play in the street because they will get hit, right? Traffic moves pretty fast. There's a lot of it. Of course, there are places where you can play in the street, but in general, it's very, very dangerous. Here in gated communities, it is very common for kids to be in the street and just wandering around and animals just wandering around because vehicles move really, really slowly and there's very few of them. It makes for a very safe situation for those activities. And it makes it pleasant for sitting out on your front yard. And it lets you do things differently. If you're in the city, and they do this in the city, right? But if you're in the city and you want to sit out on your front step and you want to have, drinks and a radio and you want to have family sitting out and everybody sitting around and hanging out, you can do that. And people do all the time. You see it everywhere. But someone always has to stay out with that stuff. If everybody walks away, people might take your stuff, right? They're just wandering. It's strangers wandering by on the sidewalk. There's just, no one's going to break in, but someone might grab a chair, right? Someone might take your radio. But when you're in a gated community, you really don't have those worries. You get to sit outside. You want to go inside for a while, you leave your stuff outside. You pop inside, do whatever you're going to do, and then come back out. Like, it's a completely different thing. You can let the kids sit out on their own. They can just hang out outside. They don't have to tell you they're going out. All kinds of freedoms that you don't get when you don't have a gated community. And then there's conveniences, right? So I've mentioned this a couple times on the channel. I have a security guard and his role is far more one of convenience than one of security. He's never had to do anything from a security standpoint other than he does things from a security standpoint. He walks around with a flashlight. He makes rounds. He ensures that nothing has happened. He's, watching over things, and he does do things like make sure our doors are locked, right? Not our doors, but like our gate. He ensures that the gate is locked. If we forget to lock the gate or someone else does, or the gate just doesn't lock for some reason, he checks it every so often and makes sure that it's closed. At one point, a latch on it broke. He had nothing to do. He fixed it, right? There's a lot of times security people do nighttime maintenance. That's a common thing in a lot of places. The security comes first, but there's generally very little to do. So they're doing maintenance stuff to keep themselves busy. It's and then you have people, you're taking deliveries. One of the biggest problems that I have here is, and I've mentioned this, the constant traffic and of foot traffic, people coming to my house. And this won't affect all of you, but it magically happens a million times more than in the United States. I don't know why this is. I haven't quite grasped it, but when I lived in the US, the number of people who would visit was approximately zero. I could go days without anybody coming to the house, never had to answer the door. If they did, if the doorbell rings, you're like, okay, it's Jehovah's Witness or it's the internet salespeople, right? Those are like the only options. Those are the only people who walk around and go door to door and show up. But when you're here, somehow I have, and a lot of it's staff, right? So it's my own doing, but I have staff coming to the door multiple times a day. I mean, easily a dozen times a day. There are gardeners, there is the cook. The cook has a key, but it could be the maid, it could be the handyman, it could be the person who does our tables, it could be the gardeners, it could be the people to read the water meter, it could be the people to collect the bills, it could be any number of things, and it's all throughout the day. It starts at about 7 o'clock in the morning and it goes all evening. And then of course you're getting food delivery often. Like, you don't have to, but a lot of people do. I do. And so you have those people coming and ringing the doorbell. And all that's to say, this constant ringing of the bell, this constant people stopping in, and often I don't need to deal with them. Often I don't need to see them. I don't need to talk to them. I don't even need to know they were there. They just have something to drop off, pick up, or do, and they're able to do it without me. I'm just the person who has to get interrupted from what I'm doing and go open the door. And so having a security guard just for that purpose, just to make sure that the people who are arriving are supposed to be arriving and letting them in without interrupting me pays for having a security guard, no question, because it's so much of my day. It's hours spent getting up from whatever I'm doing, telling a call that I'm on that I need to put them on hold. This house was completely overgrown, I believe, last time we filmed around here, and now it's very different. Looks like they've been doing some work. I wonder if it's done or partway through. I don't know. And I have to interrupt a call that I'm on. I have to tell people just whatever. I'm always in the middle of something. It's not like I sit around doing nothing. If that's what you do, right? Sounds terrible. If you're like retired and you're just chilling, right? Just having a beer, you're just enjoying a slow lunch and the doorbell rings, it's not a huge thing, right? Even if you're watching TV, just pause it and go. It doesn't really cause a big thing. You'll still probably get pretty frustrated by it, but it's not a big thing. But I am working. If I'm in the house, I'm working. I don't do other things when I'm home. I'm either spending time with my kids or I'm doing a job. If I'm not doing a job and not spending time with my kids, I'm gonna sleep, I'm gonna go out, something. I'm not going to be sitting around being idle. It's just, I do not have that kind of time. So for the doorbell to ring in my house, oh, they got some cool houses here. I'll make sure I get them. I've shown them before, but there's always new designs and stuff going on. So if the doorbell rings, it's taking me away from something important, and having that security guard is very important to reducing the amount of interruptions that happen. Really big deal for me. So that's important stuff that you don't really think about when you're considering, well, why get a security guard? And of course, in the United States, the security guard is so expensive that it's completely unreasonable, right? You're like, well, I'd have to be super rich to have one, so I'd have to be super scared of something to be willing to do it. So it must be this terrifying situation where you have to pay for a security guard. That is not at all the case. So first of all, you split a security guard between the people who live in the community. Now, if you're gonna have a private one, and lots of people do because they leave their houses unattended for long periods of time, maybe this is the place that was all grown over and now it's being reconstructed, because that is a new wall being put in right there. Interesting. Oh, there's the old one. Or, yeah, that's being rebuilt for sure. So if you have if you have a private one, because people leave their houses, there's a really common thing to do here, because it's a hot destination, because it tends to be used as a tropical getaway. There are loads of expats and locals who own second houses, and they need them to be looked after. And it is a great job for someone to be the person who just looks after a house, because obviously you get free housing, you get to live in that house, and you don't have a ton to do. Normally you do maintenance items, and you're just there to you're basically a house sitter, right? But you get paid a salary, and that makes sense. So there's a lot of those, but that's different. But when we're talking about, like, you have a gated community and a guard, it's not like each house pays for that guard. If you have 10 houses and you have a guard that costs $300 a month, well, you're each paying $30 a month, which is a lot if your income is super, super low. But if you have a more normal American income, you're gonna say, oh, that's not bad at all. $30, I won't even notice. That's like my Netflix and Hulu subscriptions. I would totally pay that for the convenience of having a person who answers the door for me, for the convenience of someone who checks the locks, for the convenience of someone who watches the kids and the dogs if I'm away. Like, what if you had to run out the door, some emergency happens and the kids are asleep? And, well, my kids are basically adults, they're teenagers. They can be left alone. They're, both of them are way over the age that Texas expects you to be a babysitter. Like, they're in no way can't be left alone. And there's two of them, right? And so, and there's neighbors that are really close who know them and can yell to each other because everything's open. But it's still, why would I want to leave them alone when I could leave them with a security guard? And in most cases, also a cook who knows them really well, and the neighbor, right? There's so many people. If we were to completely abandon our children, there's they have an entire staff of people there, plus people that they can call that are minutes away. So they have a lot going on. But that kind of peace of mind, I think any parents out there, when you hear, oh, there's a security guard, so even when my kids could otherwise be alone, I don't have to let them be alone. Because your kids will say, I can handle this, Mom, I'm good. But you don't want your kids to be completely alone, right? Like, no parent wants their kids to be just on their own if they can help it. I'm not saying we're not gonna be crazy and never let them be on their own. I'm just saying that if you are given your druthers, you're going to have a security guard there watching over them. And if it's only going to cost you $30 a month and you get all these other things, ignore the security. It's worth $30 a month or $50 a month or $5 a month in many cases. Like this community here, right? They have multiple security guards, so there's probably 80 houses. So if there's 5 security guards, that's less than $2,000, probably closer to $1,200 to $1,500 a month that they're paying in salaries for those positions, and they're creating jobs. So there's value to the economy. These are people who needed jobs, so that's good. And it's a decent job, right? It's safe and it's, you know where you're going to go, and it's a decent job. And you split that between 50 houses or whatever, and the cost per house really isn't very much. So nobody's paying very much, and you have around the clock all these things provided for you. So the convenience alone easily pays for it for almost anybody. It's really hard to not argue for it for the convenience factor. And then when you say, well, even if I'm completely secure, even if I was in the United States, I was in my old house, it's all locked up, and I lived in a really nice, safe suburb of Dallas. That's really a stupid thing to say. There is no safe place in the state of Texas, but for the state of Texas, I lived in a decently safe place. And not the absolute safest, but pretty darn safe. Like, it was good. Like, nice suburbs of Dallas, middle class, upper middle class, small families, young with retirees and, retired vets and like all that kind, like very like long-term people with like young families coming through with kids. Great community. Everybody had dogs. So it was a pretty good place, parks and lots of playgrounds and schools all over, and good police force. And so we were a very, very safe area. And I never worried about safety, ever, ever, ever. And with all that, we locked our doors, we had a good fence, we lived on a quiet street. We lived on a street that wasn't very accessible, so we were not a target for anything. We had good lights. We were the best lit street. No, we were the best lit house on our street, so the chances that someone would target us was extremely low, which is the reason why we put on really bright lights. So we made ourselves the anti-target. Doing all that, if you said for $30 to $50 a month, you could have a security guard who just walks around all night long, and there's someone out there, I'd be like, yeah, that's not even a discussion, done, right? Because it's just so nice to have that peace of mind and create a job, right? Like I'm not hurting anybody. Everybody wins in this scenario, and I just am going to sleep better. And I first encountered this living in the hotel out on the beach 2 years ago. The hotel has a security guard, partially because the hotel never closes. So it's open, like you can't lock the doors, not really. Because it's a hotel, it always has to be open, always has to be going. So you have to have security during the night. You have to have a person. So for a year, we lived on the beach, and we always had a security guard who would walk around, and at night you would see the lights flash by the windows, and we knew that they were checking on the kids. We knew they were checking on us. We knew that if we heard anything, they were going to go investigate. We knew if we had to talk to someone, if something happened, we could walk out and talk to them. We knew if the kids got up to make a midnight snack, that the security guard would be turning on the lights for them and watching over them. Like, that was such a level of comfort. It was so nice knowing that there was always someone in the middle of the night. Because when you have kids, right, you know that at night you're sleeping and your kids are also sleeping. You're like, it worries you, right? That's when you're like, oh, you can't sleep because you can't check on them, and you can't know what's going on. And when you have a security guard, suddenly you're like, this is fantastic. There's someone watching over all of us all the time. I know that if something was to have gone wrong, we would know already. And so it was fantastic. And so living here now and seeing gated communities and knowing that people do this regularly is like, oh, this makes so much sense. I totally want to do that. I don't want to be without a guard, because it's just so cheap and easy and makes sense and gives someone a job. It's just everything is right about it. That's why you see these communities with that. It makes so much sense. It's not because they need that level of security. It's because that level of security is accessible to them. The same reason that people come to Nicaragua in general. It costs less to live here, and it's safer than the United States. Well, that's a pretty big selling point. Of course, there's a lot of other factors to life than just safety, but it's a big, important one. And getting more for less is a big deal. So that's a driving factor of bringing people here. So a lot of you who are looking at Nicaragua, who are thinking about it, one of the reasons you're thinking about it is the exact same reason that this makes sense, that you spend very, very little and get a great degree of safety, of comfort, of peace of mind. It's a wonderful combination. And then, of course, there's the look and feel of a gated community. When you live in a more public space, we've talked about this a bit recently, you tend to have barbed wire or whatever to protect your space, because you don't want people hopping the wall, and just because we live outside and it's way too convenient to just grab things and run. Again, if you haven't seen those episodes, go watch them. We are not fearful of things like home invasions. We're not afraid of armed robbers and things like that here. We're afraid of people just snatching stuff off of tables and taking off with it. And we live outside so much that it's really important to have protected spaces so that we can have this outdoor comfort whenever possible. You can't always have, of course, but that's a big deal. And that's why we have the barbed wire and stuff in most cases. Well, one of the advantages to a gated community, because even Nicaraguans are going to tell you, yes, barbed wire is ugly, I don't want to have it, but it's not a big deal, right? Americans see it as a big deal, Nicaraguans see it as a minor deal, but no one sees it as desirable. So here, in a gated community, you can see, I'm hoping that this is true, I'm just going to show a little bit. I just happen to be standing here. Here's the gate, and you've seen all the spaces that I've been walking. There's no barbed wire at all. There's nothing like that. People do have, you know, bars on their patio areas, because still you don't want people just wandering in to the inside of your house per se, and they want that to be able to be wide open. So that's fine. But they don't have anything sharp above. I say that, okay, I just spotted a little bit of barbed wire, but it's like a low wall against the outside. And it allows for a much more beautiful, I mean, look how cute this street is. Right? It's all, you can park on the street, you can leave your cars out with complete safety, but the bigger issue there is getting scratched or bumped. You can have beautiful fronts to your houses, you can have these nice sidewalks, you can do all these things. And of course you're going to say, well, you can do that in the US too. And absolutely, this is one of the spots where Nicaragua often has much less attractive facades on their houses, much less attractive sidewalks. It's just a thing that they don't take the same approach to it that we do in the US. But in the gated communities, they tend to, and so you can end up with these beautiful gated communities. You can see the Fatima walk around that we did recently. Now that's a very expensive gated community, very exclusive, very high end, and then this is a very normal, affordable, reasonable. There are houses that we're looking at here that are less than $200 a month. Most are more, but that's the, we're $200 to $300 a month is the range kind of here. And at that price range, you can have this absolutely gorgeous, amazing community to live in. And I want to do another episode where we step outside and show you what the outside of the gate is like and give you a feeling there. But having this gated community gives you all these things, this beautiful environment, great opportunities, and then yes, that extra level of safety. But we all want that extra level of safety. It's just we're used to not being able to obtain it. So don't feel that it's a negative that you're able to suddenly have this bonus. It's just one of the many things that now you can have because you're in Nicaragua. Thanks for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, there's a link right up there. Buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. That comes directly to me. It's like Patreon and helps pay for all the things we do on this channel. If you're looking for assistance in relocating, whether it's just a conversation or actually someone on the ground to go look at houses or help you get furniture or whatever, shoot us an email, info@relocatenicaragua.com. As always, like, subscribe, share on social media, tell your friends, post the link anywhere you can think of, and I will see all of you tomorrow.